Today, Jabba the Hutt is such an iconic design that we're so familiar with that it's hard to imagine that during the initial production of Return of the Jedi, they had almost no idea what Jabba as a character would look like. While George Lucas did have a general idea that he would be a big fat crime lord, they didn't really know what that would look like, whether he would be a humanoid or a gigantic alien slug. In my video about Regal Robot's replica of the early Jabba the Hutt concept Maquette, I went into a fair amount of detail about the creation of the Jabba design, and if you haven't seen that, I would recommend that you go back and take a look at that first. Today we're going to be looking at a specific part of that process, a maquette made by Chris Walas. And I'm also going to be reviewing the Regal Robot replica of this maquette as well, but first, a little bit of background. Now, Mr. Walas is an Academy Award-winning artist who worked on movies such as Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Fly, as well as designing the gremlin creatures from the movie Gremlins. But he also played a big part in designing many of the creatures in Return of the Jedi, some of which you can see here. But in addition to these guys, he also was involved in the early sort of exploratory process in designing Jabba the Hutt before they had an idea of what exactly he would look like. He talked about this experience in an interview with Regal Robot's Tom Spina.
I actually did a bunch of Jabba designs, only a few of which I even submitted. The one you're referring to, I haven't seen Ralph McQuarrie's design. I don't think Ralph had even been working on the project when we were working on it. And Joe Johnson had asked me to come up with a few alternate Jabba designs. And so I did, and that one was just a suggest. That was more from Joe's description than anything else, because we had very, very, very little to go on in terms of designing these characters and what they were supposed to be able to do or not do. We didn't have a script, we didn't have storyboard, we didn't have anything. Basically do a bunch of aliens. So that's one of my Jabba ones. I think. That one was based more on it being a guy in a suit, rather than some of the other ones which are designed as puppets or, operated by various different ways.
I've heard people say that this concept maquette is reminiscent of Ralph McQuarrie, and that's what he was referring to in the earlier part of the interview. And especially if you look at some of the drawings that Ralph McQuarrie did for Jabba, you can definitely see that there is a resemblance there. But Mr. Walas mentioned in the interview that Ralph McQuarrie wasn't even working on Jedi at the time that he made this maquette, so it's possible that Ralph McQuarrie saw this maquette and then was working from that, but I think it's most likely that they just were given similar prompts and so they got similar results from them. By the way, I've heard some people claim that as Morrigan from Star Wars Rebels, who you see here, is based on this same concept maquette, but I think it's actually incorrect. I believe this is based on a Ralph McQuarrie drawing that was a concept for Jabba. And it's pretty different, I feel, in terms of the atmosphere. This looks like maybe a bureaucrat or, kind of sniveling kind of character, whereas the Chris Walas version looks big and hulking and muscular, very different in my eyes than the one that they turned into as Morrigan. Unlike the other concept maquettes that were made for Jabba, this one is just a bust, so we don't know what his body would have looked like if they had used this design. But I always imagine it to be basically a humanoid design. This is, essentially a humanoid-looking face, and I just sort of extrapolate from there. I've always thought of it as something kind of like the Goblin King from the Hobbit movie. I think something similar to what we see here could have worked for Jabba. In fact, they even show him on a throne, not unlike what could have been in Jabba's palace in this alternate version that I'm imagining. I think he would have been more mobile as a character, though. He would have been able to maybe walk around. He mentioned that this version would have been a man in a suit instead of a puppet, so you can imagine how that would have changed Jabba as a character in all the scenes that we know him in. It is really interesting to think about this for me, just how this would have changed the dynamic between him and the other characters. I think it's about time to look at the actual Regal Robot replica, because, the photography of the original maquette that I have available to me is not great. It's kind of low resolution and grainy. So this will help us really get a look at the details. Regal Robot has done a really amazing job on this paint work, I think. It is very complex. There's a lot of layering of color here, a lot of detail that I really appreciate, especially when we look at the back in just a second. You'll see what I mean by that. But here on the front, we've got, you know, it's literally all just flesh, I guess you'd say, but so much variation in color and just, yeah, I'm really impressed. It would be easy to, you know, kind of do a half measure here and kind of just make it all pink with a little bit of highlights and shading, but this is definitely not that. They've done a lot of work on these. On the back, you can see, compared to the front, he's much darker, and I'm assuming that all these details are from the original Maquette. I don't see any reason to think that they're not, but I've never seen the original Maquette from the back, so it's hard to know. He's got this darker coloration here. He's got a bunch of speckles, and also, if you look closely here, especially on the head portion, you have all these veins, blue and red veins that you can kind of see. They look almost like they're under the skin, kind of faintly visible, which is really cool. I'm really impressed with this. Now, I think most people buying this, realistically, will already have the other two Jabba concept maquettes that Regal Robot has produced, so I think it's worth bringing them out and seeing how they look together with this guy. I think you could use these guys, you know, in a kind of a Jabba-centric display. Have something really cool. I mean, it would be all the different incarnations of Jabba together, especially if, fingers crossed, Regal Robot is able to do the so-called two-human version of Jabba, the one that has him with multiple arms and he's sort of sitting on a throne. That would be awesome to have them all just displayed together. I think that's probably how I will be displaying them when I, you know, eventually get sort of a semi-permanent version of my display all set up. But there are various ways, of course, you can do this. You could have these kind of like this. You could have them in a row, something like that. Or you could have something, you know, this guy maybe up on a riser in the back so you could see it a little better. There's a lot of possibilities, but I do think it would look really cool on display for sure. By the way, one thing I noticed when I was looking at these guys together is another similarity, kind of like the similarity we saw between this one and the Ralph McQuarrie sketches, and that is that if we look on the back of all these, they all share a similar feature. I don't know if you can tell. They all have this kind of weird sack type thing on the back. The one on this one, the kind of semi-final concept, really reminds me of an octopus's rear head. They have kind of a weird bulbous sack there, but all of them have something kind of similar. And in fact, this one here, the caterpillar-like one, is divided into two sections, although one of them is a little bit asymmetrical. And this one is also divided into two sections. I don't know how that came to be, if there was like some part of the prompt that they were given by Joe Johnston or whoever it was in charge, maybe included, you know, as, oh, by the way, make sure he has a really bulbous back of the head or something like that. I don't know. Or maybe, you know, there was a pencil sketch along the way that they liked, and they said, well, you know, let's incorporate this detail in there. I don't know exactly how that happened, but it is a cool detail to see. This guy should be available for order right now. I'll put a link in the video description. There's going to be two different editions of this, which is typical for Regal Robot's archive collection stuff. The first is the Signature Edition, which is limited to 100 pieces and will sell for $399. That comes with a signature plaque from Chris Walas. And then there is the Legacy Edition, which includes a signature plaque from Chris Walas, as well as some unique artwork. This one will be limited to only 55 pieces and will sell for $699. I happen to have my version of that Legacy Edition right here, so I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Put him over here. And here is the plaque that I received. You can see it's got this version of Jabba here in some cool artwork. In fact, we get to see, apparently he has a few teeth, which is interesting. I know he's used a lot of like different colored backgrounds and things to make these unique, which is pretty cool. And then here we have his signature as well, Jabba the Hutt concept bust. So, you know, I'm a big fan, as I've mentioned in the past, of these concept legacy edition concepts, which include actual artwork from the person responsible for the original artwork that we're getting a replica of. I think it really just makes it a lot more special. Now, they do have, I'm told, a payment plan of up to 6 months if you want to spread out the cost a little bit. And I think these are actually, to some degree, already made, because they're a relatively small team working, you know, in New York. They don't have a factory in China or anything. They have to do these, you know, as they're able. But they've made a number of these in advance, so that you should be able to get it fairly quickly if you order soon. All right, well, that's about it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned a little something. I'm curious how many of you all had even heard of this bust in the past, this concept, I guess I should say, of Jabba. And if you had, what did you think of it? I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Put it in the comments, and I'll see you again very, very soon.